Now we move on to our next film, a hidden gem, perhaps, or maybe a lump of coal in the dirt. William Tell, directed by Nick Ham. Now, Ruben went to see this because you had an advanced screening or a screening that you could watch and engage with, which is really interesting because I think this film is nowhere to be seen. It's like the myth of William Tell. It's sort of in the air, but you can't really knuckle it down. But yeah, I'd love to know about the film. Tell us whether it's successful, whether it should get a wider release, whether people should flock to the cinema to see it, Ruben, as you did go and see it. So please tell us about William Tell and your thoughts.
So it's interesting. I mean, this, as you say, it has got a release, but it's not a huge one. It's not on that many screens. And to be honest, the place to see this is in the cinema because it's a big, bloody action historical epic. This is sort of gladiator territory, although, on a significantly smaller budget. It basically is a retelling of the folk tale of William Tell, which I have to say I'm not familiar with, but it is basically a kind of Robin Hood-esque story about a man who stands up to authority, is very skilled with a bow, and ultimately leads a rebellion. And in this film, the central character of William Tell is played by Claes Bang. I think is really good here. He gives completely a sense of Shakespearean grandeur to the role of William Tell. I was watching this thinking, gosh, I want to be seeing him perform Macbeth on the stage because he's got such gravitas, and it's something about the way that he has those slightly vampiric teeth and things. There's a sinisterness to him, there's a menace that means that even though he's playing a heroic figure here, we get the sense of demons lurking underneath. And basically, he finds himself in a situation where, for the protection of his family, for the protection of the community that he cares about, he ends up becoming a kind of unwitting figurehead for rebellion, which makes him the target of Connor Swindells from Sex Education. Sinister baddie, essentially. I'm just going to call him a baddie, who then is hunting down William Tell. And I have to say, Connor Swindells is having the time of his life in this film. There is no bit of scenery unchewed. He's scoffing the lot. Everything is delivered in this kind of very broad, just generally sort of ne'er-do-well manner that I just really enjoyed. He's frequently hacking limbs off innocent people or ordering the deaths of children, and he's doing it all with relish. And that's basically kind of the tone of this film. It's two steps away from Panto, if only there was a lot more blood and gore when you go and see Mother Goose. I can't say I wasn't entertained by it. It delivers really good big screen spectacle. I kind of mentioned Gladiator, and, actually, I was really impressed by the action sequences in this. They're very crunchy. You get a real sense of like, that's a bit, oh gosh, what am I seeing? At times, which is always a sign that something's got me. The fact is, I sort of knew that this story was going to follow a set narrative because this is a kind of piece of mythos that exists in the world. I enjoyed it. I was never bored. I think that it could lose a solid 20 minutes, but to be honest, most of those scenes that you'd be cutting are pretty entertaining sequences. You've got a great cast in there, and I'd hate to lose any of them. Jonathan Pryce, Sir Ben Kingsley, they're all popping up left, right, and centre. And I thought that it also had actually quite a good score by Stephen Pryce. I think it's very difficult when you've got, obviously, the overture of William Tell so iconic and associated with that character. Quite difficult to write a good, rousing piece of music, but he delivered. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was quite good. I wish it had been maybe slightly shorter. But yeah, overall, it was fine.
That's interesting to hear you say that. I'd seen in my little cinema app, oh, what's this film? I've never seen a trailer, never heard it was coming out. And, big actors are there. And Claes Bang, he's up and coming. He was in The Northman as well, Robert Eggers' previous film too.
Masterpiece. A masterpiece.
I won't. The Northman, the North superhero. But yes, I find it interesting that I wanted to say is But from your point of view, these folkloric stories, similar to Robin Hood, that get these massive remakes, and William Tell, this might be the most recent of its big screen adaptations, but do you think it still has a place in modern cinema where it seems that every reiteration of Batman, Spider-Man, they get billions and billions of dollars, but stuff like Robin Hood, the most recent one with Taron Egerton, failed miserably. And this idea of William Tell that doesn't even get a wide marketing campaign in this country where it is released, where it is on screens. Why do you think that is? And do you think that the film actually earns itself a better respect, or is it just falling into blockbuster schlock and that's why it's losing off? What's your sort of opinion of that?
That's such a good question because it's true that we haven't really seen many of these kind of big budget movies that are engaging with these kind of traditional myths and legends be very successful, really, last 20 years. I think Robin Hood, the Taron Egerton version, is actually a good sort of comparison because this actually takes a slightly similar approach to some of the kind of the action on screen, because that very much was, I mean, it was basically like they were lobbing grenades at times. And in this, there is definitely a kind of sense of, okay, in this sequence, the crossbows are basically rifles. There is definitely a kind of attempt to modernize things a bit. But I think the strength of this is that actually it hews quite close to, I think, the original material. It hews quite close to the traditional narrative. And it presents it in a fairly conventional way. And I don't mean conventional as a criticism. There is a lot of good to be said about kind of old-fashioned filmmaking. And this, I think, slots very neatly into it. It's not swords and sandals, but it's almost there, kind of fun, feel fairly good, epic. And I think that if we can get another really big hit out of that genre, it might well be revitalized. I think someone has to come along and work out perhaps what the key to those stories is and what makes them tick. A bit like with something like The Wolfman. I think if we have a slightly revised approach to, okay, what's this actually about thematically? Like, what are we saying? What does this mean in the 21st century? We might be able to kind of see this genre of film get a new lease of life. But at the moment, it's perfectly okay. I mean, as I said at the beginning, you should see this at the cinema if you're going to, because the visuals are very good and the action is crunchier if you're watching it with a really good sound system. But at the end of the day, are many people going to see this? I don't think that they are. And that's not just because the release isn't that big, it's also because these movies just are not in vogue anymore. And that's a shame, but it happens, and I think that they will come back.